What's up, guys? My name's Royce, and welcome to my super simple Unreal Engine beginner's course for the indie filmmaker. The way I like to learn is I jump into a program, try to actually get the result that I want versus trying to learn all the buttons and shortcuts and things like that first. Not to say you won't learn anything in this, but if that's how your mind works, then I think this is going to be a really good tutorial for you. And at the end of this tutorial, what you would have learned is downloading, opening Unreal Engine, learning a little bit of the interface, how to move around, and then we'll jump into creating a short cinematic so you get the experience of actually creating a little short film that you can export, share online, and feel good about yourself. Now, if you're following along on a Mac, everything we're doing is going to be exactly the same. So to start off, open up your web browser of choice. I got Microsoft Edge here, and go to unrealengine.com. And over here on the top right, go ahead and hit download. And I'm forgetting at what point it will prompt you, but you will have to create an Epic Games account if you don't have one yet. And once you have that downloaded and installed, go ahead and open up the Epic Games launcher. Now, if you're a gamer, you might already have this launcher because this is their storefront for their video games, right? But if you see here on the left, what we want to pay attention to is Unreal Engine. And there actually is a way if you want to get rid of these tabs here. If you're just using this for Unreal Engine, you don't care about the game store at all. And if you want to do that, go ahead and go over down to the bottom left where it says settings. And then right here, it'll say hide game library. Go ahead and click that. Disable game library, hit OK. And when we exit out of here, all you'll see is Unreal Engine, baby, because that's all that matters. And what we're seeing is literally the hub of Unreal Engine before you even open the app. And the first tab here is the news tab. So this is all the hottest stuff that's happening in the Unreal Engine world, weekly spotlights of some cool projects that people are creating. And now here is the library section. So this is where you'll install Unreal Engine. So let's go ahead and start that now because it is a pretty long process. I already have it installed, but if you go up here, hit this plus button, then it'll say 5.3.2, which is the most recent version as the time of this recording. And just go ahead and hit install. And what will pop up is this options window. Now, if you don't care about the video game part of this at all, of this engine, then scroll down here where it says target platforms and uncheck all of these, because all this means is that these are platforms that if you were creating games, I would want my game to be on an Android device or iOS or Linux, right? If you're not trying to mess with that at all, definitely uncheck these because it will significantly reduce the amount of storage on there. I keep them checked though, because part of me is like, I want to make games one day. Probably won't happen, but you never know. Now, if you're following along on a Mac, along with downloading Unreal Engine, you're also going to want to make sure you have Xcode downloaded, and you can get that from the Mac App Store on your desktop. This right here, if you don't already have it installed. And for whatever reason, Xcode is needed for Unreal Engine to open because it looks for it. Now, along with downloading Xcode though, you need to at least open it once for the first time if you've never used it before and agree to its terms. If you don't do that, Unreal Engine also will not open. And rest assured, everything we go over from this point on will translate to the Mac. It's just, Windows and menus are gonna look a little different. So now that you got the install going, I'll explain some other things, right? So what's cool is you can actually install older version. You see it gave me the option to install 5.1.1. A reason you might want to do this is, especially when a newer version comes out, you might want to keep the older version maybe one or two below, just in case, because each new version, though, may have new features, will introduce new bugs. And so if you just want to use the version that you just know is stable and works, that gives you some flexibility to do that. Plus, like once you start getting into downloading plugins and things like that, certain plugins take a minute to update to the latest version. And then the next tab here are the samples. And as it says, these are sample projects that Epic Games provides that you can download and just mess around with and see how they do certain stuff. So over here, this city sample, if you saw when the new Matrix movie was coming out, that kind of like Matrix video game that they were advertising that you could actually download and play, this is the actual sample of that full city that you can download and play the way you did if you were on a console, but be able to move around and manipulate certain things within that project, which is really dope. And this next tab is the marketplace. This is where your bank account is going to struggle. Okay, I'm just gonna say that right now. So this is where you go to buy assets, anything that you're looking for, from characters to backgrounds to foliage. Now there's other third-party websites where you can do that as well, but this is the easiest way because the integration with their marketplace with the program is seamless. But what's cool is every month they provide free assets that you can download. As you can see here, I already got them owned. So every month, just check this out, come back here and just put it all to cart, check out. Doesn't even matter if it's not even relevant to what you're doing, just do it, because one day it just might be. That happens to me all the time where I don't even check to see what these things are. I just add them. And then like months later, I'll like be scrolling. I'm like, man, I really wish I had this one thing or for this feature. And then I'll just search it in my vault and be like, wait, I don't even know when I got this, but I have it. Cool, let's add it, you know? And I'm always in this new releases section. Just every morning, I just check to see what the new releases are because I like to stay up to date as far as what people are putting out. On this side is Twin Motion. This is for like architecture. I have no idea how to even describe it. But if you are into buildings, then this is good, but that's not what we're doing, so we're gonna skip it. And now if we scroll down here where it says My Projects, this is where all your most recent projects will pop up and populate once you start making stuff, right? And so you can see here, I got a few things. And if I just double click here, I don't have to like go up here and hit launch Unreal Engine. I could just double click on any of these projects and they will open up. And if we keep scrolling down, then you'll see your vault. So this is where all the assets that you download from or buy from the marketplace will live. So all those free assets I told you about every month, they will just start popping up right here and populating. And then, you know, as you can see, I got a good amount of things. Now, not all of them are free. As I started getting better in the program, I started investing in some assets that I think were important. But starting out, definitely everything free. Just keep everything free. And there's a lot of free stuff that you can utilize. So if I go back to the marketplace, actually, I'll just show you real quick. Right here where it says free, you can see free Epic Games content, UI Online Learning, Mega Scans, free for the month, permanently free collection. If we click on that, and you just scroll through and see all the things that are just free forever. You can see there's pages and pages of this stuff. So definitely go through and just see what's free first before investing into anything. Now, whenever Unreal Engine finishes installing for you, whatever that point is in time, when it's done, you'll see launch here. You'll also see in the top right, it says launch Unreal Engine 3.2. However you want to launch it, you know, do you, right? I usually just click it over here. You're going to hit launch. And for the very first time, it's actually going to take a minute for Unreal Engine to open up. That's just kind of like how it is. It does this even if you are starting a new project. It just kind of like needs to get the gears going. So it opened pretty fast for me, but for you, since it's your very first time, it's going to take a second. And over here, you'll see the recent projects that I have here that you can open from here as well. Then it has some template tabs. So there's the game section, film and video, architecture, automotive, simulation. Now, ironically enough, I do not use any of the film or video live events templates at all. My go-to, and I'll explain this later down the road, is I always create a game template, the third person template, because this template gives you a lot of useful things when it comes to creating cinematics and things like that you wouldn't really think about. So I'm gonna go ahead and click third person, and then over here, target platform, you know, desktop. So we're not gonna worry about too much because we're not making an actual game. Quality preset, I'll choose maximum. I'm working on a laptop which has a mobile 3070. Actually handles things pretty well, but it definitely has its limits. And then you have the option to select starter content and ray tracing. For this purpose, I will select starter content because that includes some important things to start off with to learn. And ray tracing definitely helps improve the quality of your projects, but depending on your machine, it might not be powerful enough to really handle it. So I'm just gonna leave it unchecked for now, and you can always turn it back on in settings later. So I'll just leave that unchecked for now. And then down here, project location, you could choose where you want to save your project and your project name. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm just gonna title this first project. And just a heads up, you can't put spaces. Unreal Engine hates spaces for the most part, and it will yell at you. If you wanna have a separation of any kind, the best way is just to do an underscore if you want to separate it with anything else. I'm just gonna put first project and then hit create. Now this opened up pretty quick for me, but since this will be the first project for all you, if not all you guys, most of you guys, it will take some time. And where it'll probably get hung up is the section on the loading screen where it says compiling shaders. And what all that means is it's getting the materials, all the files ready for you to use, because everything that happens in here is real time. And that's why it's such a powerful tool for video games and for cinematics, because everything you create is in real time. You can make adjustments, changes, whatever, add things in the moment, right? You don't have to do a bunch of stuff and then render it out and then wait an hour or two to see if what you did worked. And now we're in Unreal Engine. Crazy. This is wild, right? The first time for me when I opened up Unreal Engine, I was like, what's going on? But this is nope, regret it. Not doing this, right? But it's okay. It's okay. We're going through it together. Take in the interface, just deep breaths, right? We're going to break it down in a very simple way. And as you can see here, the interface, even on a Mac, is going to look exactly the same. Only difference is obviously up top, the windows are Mackin, you know? So it's going to look like that. All this over here, this is what's called the viewport. This is what's in your scene, right? So everything you see here, go ahead and click with your mouse, all this stuff. This is what's going to be in our scene, whether it's a video game or a cinematic. The viewport is the gateway to our set. That's one way to look at it, right? And so to navigate this viewport, to move it around, it's actually pretty awesome. You move around just the way you would a video game on a PC, WASD. And to be able to move around, just hold down the right click here. And if you get lost, I'll have the little buttons here that you can look at so you know what I'm clicking. So right click, hold that down. If you move around your mouse, you move around the viewport. Think of this as your, camera in a sense. It's not a camera. We're actually going to be creating cameras, but for now, you can kind of think of like this being where your camera is being pointed at. And now, keeping the right click held down, press and hold down W, you can see you can move around and fly. Move your mouse around, you're flying around your set. This is awesome. This is so cool. Over here, this is going wild. But just shows you, I'm holding down W. Same thing with A, go to the side, to the left. D, go to the right. S, you go back. And again, if you're a PC gamer, you already know what to do. Start moving around, start going crazy, hitting all the different buttons, WASD. Now, if you want a little bit more control going up and down, if you press and hold Q, you go down, press and hold E, you go up. So that way you don't have to think you have to like tilt up or tilt all the way down like that. And with all that, those are the movement keys. This is how you move around in your scene. This is great. Now, if you were like me when I first started, this is moving way too fast. How do I slow things down? There's two ways to control that. If you go up here kind of in the top right of the viewport, you'll see here camera speed. And if you click on camera speed, there's this little bar that you can move around. Now there's a glitch for me. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. If I scroll, it starts to jitter and go crazy. So if I put this all the way down to 0.03 and then I try to move in the viewport, you can see I'm moving real slow. Now this, you might not want to move this slow ever, but this helps for those moments where you need to move very precise to a specific point, right? Without losing track of your actor or object. Another shortcut though, so you don't even have to deal with that, especially if it's glitching, hold down, right click, and if you have a mouse with the mouse wheel, if you scroll up and down on the mouse wheel while you're holding down the right click, you can see up in the top right corner, that's another way to control the camera speed. And let me tell you, that right there is Unreal Engine gold. When I figured that out, that helped me so much, man, because having to constantly go up here, change some speeds, do what you need to do, then go back up, change it again, it gets annoying. So just being able to quickly change your speed here on the fly is huge, absolutely major. So definitely keep that in your back pocket. Now, let me say something before I move on. If your interface looks different for whatever reason, that's okay. Everything can be manipulated and moved in any area that you want. So if you go up here to window, you'll see all these options here. So if for some crazy reason your viewport isn't even showing, you go down, if you hit Windows or window and go down to viewport, you can see the option to select your viewport. You can add a second viewport. if you wanted. You can put them next to each other. So when you move a window here, there's little guides of where you can snap the window to. Or if you have dual monitors, you can drag this over to your second monitor if you want another view. So, you know, if you want to focus on this object on this viewport, but you want to keep this like a wide, you can do that too. This will, you know, tax your machine. I don't know if you can hear it, but my laptop is, the fans are working right now. So, you know, depending on how powerful your machine is, you might not even want to do this. I never do it. So, you know, outliner over here on the top right side. This is a list of all the objects and eventually actors and characters that are in your scene. So if I select this cube here on the right side, it'll select it in the viewport. I can do that over here. Now, if you have an object selected and you hit F, it'll focus on that object. So that's a really quick way to kind of, if you get lost somewhere, if you have this huge level or scene that you're working on and you're over here, you're like, okay, I see what I want, but I can't see it in the viewport. Just hit F and it'll focus on it real quick. And then below the outliner, you have what's called details. And so this is where you can change settings and manipulate the objects in your scene. So if I select this cube right here, and I go down here, let me scroll it up like this. You see I have location, rotation, and scale. I can change the location here, scale it, make it bigger, or rotate it. Or if I go over here to static mesh, if I have other meshes, I can just change it right here to a different, what is this? Error, okay. If this pops up, usually just go over here and hit fix and it'll solve your problem. And then now it's a chair. And if I don't like any of these things, these little back buttons here, these are resets. That'll put it back to how it was. But as you can see here, I lost track. If I hit F, I can find it. You can also move things in the viewport itself with these arrows. If you're used to 3D software, then this will look very familiar to you. If not, just know that if you drag these arrows here, this is how you can move stuff in your scene. So this is another quick way to move things around. Or if you hit this ball here, it's not as precise, but you can make larger movements versus, you know, hitting an arrow to go in a specific direction. Now, if you go up here in the viewport, you have a couple selection options, right? So here's just the arrow key. If you select that, then, you know, it just allows you to select things without manipulating them really in any way. If you go over here to the translate objects, this is what we were doing. This is where we can move that object in our scene. The next one is the rotate objects, which is how we rotate objects, which is good. A lot of these tools are self-explanatory. And again, depending on the color or the axis, that's how your object will be rotated. So you can see on the right here, as we rotate in the viewport, it's reflected in the details panel or page. Tab, one of those. And then scale, you can scale it in whatever direction you want or as a whole and make it larger. So these are the tools that you will use to manipulate objects. And then over here is pretty much the increments in how you can manipulate these objects. So right here, if you select the 10 snap sizes, if you switch it to 1, when you move this object, you'll be able to move it more freely versus if, say, you have it like to 500, it'll literally snap to that point and you can only move it that amount. So this is just another way to kind of get a little bit more control over how you're manipulating objects. Same with rotation. By rotate it only by 10 degrees, only rotate it by 60 degrees. So if we go back here to rotation, it'll only rotate 60 degrees. So if you know an exact amount that you want to manipulate something, this is how you control that. Or you lower it to the lowest and go wild for more control. Now, a quicker way to get to these tools so you don't have to constantly come back up here to select things is when you don't have the right mouse button held down or clicked, if you hit Q, that will activate just your arrow key so you can select stuff. If you hit W, that will be the move tool. If you hit E, that will be the rotate. and then R will be your scale. And so just be aware that, again, if you're holding down the right mouse button, it'll activate the movement navigation. If you're not pressing the right mouse button, and you hit Q, W, E, or R, it'll activate the manipulation tools. That's how your fingers are going to be working most of the time is I'm moving, but now I'm moving this, but now I'm over here. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is one of the most important parts of Unreal Engine, and it's the content browser. And that's where all your files are actually going to be located. So if you see here, there's no window. Move myself. As you can see, there's no window that says content browser. Now, how it's set up by default is this browser is hidden. Or if you see here, this is called the content drawer. But if you go up to window, you can see here content browser. These are the windows here. But if you hit control space, that will now pull up your content browser. Even on a Mac, it's still going to be control space to access that. Okay. And I say that because sometimes control then switches over to command on the Mac for a lot of shortcuts, right? So just know that it's not command space, it's still control space for Mac as well. And like I said, this is how Unreal Engine has it set up to begin with. And this is good if you don't have a lot of real estate on your monitor. You can go here, browse all of your files, and then when you're done with that, hit control space again and to hide it. So you have more space in the viewport, which you will want so you can see more of your scene. But if you got a little bit extra space, if you got a larger monitor, what you'll want to do, and what I tend to do, is I go up to window, content browser, and then I actually select the content browser that I want and then put it off to the side. Or you can bring it down and just put it down here. Put it wherever you want, and then you can adjust the size of it that you want. So I like this, so it's just here and good to go. Now, say, you want these images to be a little bit bigger. If you go over here to settings in your content browser and go all the way down to thumbnail size, you have options to change the size of everything. So I can hit large, so you really can see them, or you can hit small. You can fit a lot more, but that's just wild. That's absolutely wild. I usually keep it at medium. It's a nice in-between. Since I'm here, you can see there's this ceiling light, and these are, again, objects that came from that starter pack. So it's great. So now you have quick access to all these things that you can just drop in and start messing around with. So I could drag and drop this into our scene and then move it up. And it already has a light attached to it, which is great. So this is already lighting our scene. I mean, it's a sunny scene, so you can't really see it too much, but you can see here, this lamp is lighting the chair. And this is, again, going back to what I was saying, all this is in real time. Nothing has to be rendered out first. You can actually see how certain objects and features manipulate things in your scene as it's happening, which is so cool. So you can start seeing, once you get into designing levels and scenes with characters, and say it's like a dark alley or something like that, you can really start throwing in lights and playing with that and see the results in real time and adjust things. Now that we got a decent look into the interface, definitely take more time to play around with them if you want. Like I said, I'm not jumping into a lot of this other stuff because it's not really that important yet. We want to then now make a cinematic and throw it out into the world and be like, look, I did something in Unreal Engine. I am the greatest. I'm better than you. No, don't do that. But you can think it though. And before we get into our cinematics, there's actually one other thing I want to show you, just because it's just really cool to experience the first time. If you see this play button, again, if you're going into this with game design in mind, this is what you'll hit to actually play your game and to demo it to make sure it's working properly. And with this level that we selected, the third person character level, it's already ready to kind of play, which is really cool. So if you just hit play, you already have a character in a level. And if you just click on the viewport, you can now control that character. And using WASD, you can now run around the level. This may be so simple to some people, but to me, when I first was learning, I was like, I'm doing it. I'm designing things. I made a game, even though I had nothing to do with this. but it's just cool to kind of see this, right? And so you can set it up once you have your levels and stuff designed. You can make it so you throw this character in there, or it could be your own custom character to walk around your scene and your level just to like experience it from a gaming standpoint and like just make it more interactive, you know? And this is how you can even bridge the gap of making your projects half cinematic, half gaming, you know? I think it's cool. I don't know. Hopefully you guys think it's cool, but my first time, I was literally running around in circles for like the first hour, just jumping on. And like, it already has physics. Like if I hit that, it moves around. Like I find it cool. Now, if you hit escape, it'll end the game. Now let's jump in and make our cinematic. So what we're gonna do here in the content browser, for me, it's the bottom left. We're gonna look through some of these files here, right? So we're gonna look for characters. And then we're gonna go to mannequins, and then meshes, and then SKM Manny, or you could do SKM Quinn. These are the stock kind of characters for Unreal Engine. They're the mascots of Unreal Engine. So you saw when we were playing the game, what we saw was SKM Quinn. I'll throw in SKM Manny into our level. And now our character is in our level. This is so cool. Now, let's make him do stuff, right? So what we're gonna wanna do is create what's called a level sequence. This is going to pretty much create a timeline where we can add animations, add cameras, camera movements, do keyframing, things like that to actually create our short. Now, if you go up here to the clapper, click on it, it'll say add level sequence. You know, we click on that, we can choose where we want to save this. So I'm actually going to right click, create new folder, and just call it sequences. Just so you get used to actually creating folders as well. And then I'm gonna double click that, come down here to where it says name, and do first short, whatever, name it whatever you want, then hit save. And so now this is going to open up another window. And again, if your monitor real estate isn't the best, this is where things are going to start getting a little cluttered. So you're going to kind of want to think about how you want to organize stuff. So in this instance, I may actually want to close out my content browser to make more room for, well, let me get that out the way, make more room for my timeline or my sequencer, and where I could still see my viewport pretty decently. And again, we can always access the content browser by hitting Control Space whenever we want to get access, Control Space again to hide it. And I'll move this back over here. If we click on our character here, we can now see him in the outliner. He is now in our scene, SKM Manny. And again, to somehow your sequence or your viewport is in some weird place, click SKM Manny, hit F, and it'll focus right on him. And we can rotate him. We can move him wherever we want, which is cool. And one more thing about the outliner, if, you know, you're scrolling around and there's just too many things in the scene like right now, but you want to find where the SKM Manny is, you can just type in Manny in the search bar and it'll pop up there as well. Now we want to add our character into our sequencer so we can manipulate him and add animations. So we're going to select SKM Manny, and there's a couple ways we could do this. We can either drag and drop from the outliner into sequencer. Nice. Don't freak out. All this stuff just popped up. This is called a control rig, and this is if you're looking to animate manually, the natural old school way, the respectable way. But what I tend to do is wherever, look for anim outliner, it might pop up for you in different places, but just look for that tab. I'm just gonna hit X to close that out. And also with this right here, it says animation mode. I'm just gonna go back to selection. Right, you'll see that right up here. If it popped up at any point, animation, just go back up to selection. Don't worry about these, that's for another video. Eyes on the prize, guys. Now we got this going, right? We have it added. I'll delete him though, just so you can see another way, and kind of like how I tend to do it is you can also add them to your sequencer by selecting the character, then hitting track, add to sequencer, and whatever selected will show up at the top here, add SKM Manny. Bam. And now we're back. And then now I'm back closing the things that I don't want. Switch that back to selection. And this will keep popping up because what we need to do is delete this track right here. This is the actual rig track. So if we delete that, it gets rid of it. And then we go back up here to from animation mode to selection. And now we're good to go. It'll never come back ever again. And so underneath our character, right, we have animation. So this is where we'll add our animation track. And these can be animations that you got from the marketplace or animations, say, once you get to a point that you have motion capture. This is also where you will add it. And then we have some transform tools that we can manipulate, add keyframes to, which we will also do so you can see that as well. And adding things to sequencers isn't just limited to characters, right? I could add this, plane, this floor. I can add this cube, track, add to sequencer, cube. So anything in your level or your scene can be added to sequencer to animate and manipulate. But I will delete that because I'm not trying to do nothing with the cube. So now the next thing that you're going to want to do is go over here. You see this little camera on the sequencer on the top of that window. Click that because that's going to create your camera. So we tap that. And this, my friends, this is where it begins. The addiction. This is where you'll never look back. So now we have our camera. So I'm navigating through this scene here, as you can see in the viewport. Now we're actually moving our camera. So whatever this right now is looking at is what will be rendered out for our short when we're done. So obviously we want to make sure it's pointing towards our character. Now you want to be careful because creating your camera for the first time like that, the program will automatically possess it, right? Which is good because it's a really fun and quick way to position your camera. But if you want to move something else, say you want to move the character and then you're moving this around, guess what? You just moved your camera and you messed up your perfect shot. So you can always hit Control Z and go back, but sometimes you go too far beyond repair. So what you want to make sure is once you have the camera positioned, right? There's two options to handle this. In the first thing, which I think is the easiest, in the viewport up here, kind of in the top left, it says pilot, actor, cinema, camera, actor. That means that you're piloting or controlling the camera. What you want to do is hit this eject button, and that will get rid of possessing the camera. And then you actually see here, the camera is now in your level. But if you have your camera selected, you can see a little preview over here of what it's still looking at. If you click away though, it'll go away. It'll only show it if you're actually selecting the camera. Another way is over here in the actual sequencer down below where it says cinema, camera, actor, there's the camera icon. So if I select that, it will bring up the camera again where I can manipulate. And when I'm done, I just hit the camera again and it goes back to the viewport. So you have some options on how you want to control that. Let's click back because is this how you want your camera to look? I don't think so. Or maybe it is. Maybe this is it, But as you notice, there's no background's not blurred, no depth of field. Is this the aspect ratio you want? You can change all that. Over here, now back in the details panel, I moved it so you can see, so that's why you can't really see the outliner. I moved it up, have my camera selected, right? Look over here. Look at all these settings. Film back. This is where you can select what type of camera it is. 16:9, 16:9 digital. Little pop in a little bit. 16:9 DSLR. Bam. Move back. Super 8. Super 16. Super 35. 35 Academy. You see what I'm getting at. Freaking IMAX. Let's go. What do you want? What do you want? We can mess with anything. You can even completely customize this. If I click this arrow, the sensor width and height, you can make it some random number. You can make up your own. That's crazy. You can play with this all you want. But then once you kind of, you figure out what you want to do, I'll just do 16:9 DSLR and I'll close this. Then lens settings, universal zoom, 12mm prime lens, 50mm, 85. What do you want? It's got it all. You can see here, so it has the minimum and maximum f-stop. You can manipulate that. So even though it says 85mm prime, f1.8. So 1.0. That's wild. The possibilities are endless on how accurate, how film accurate, or how film wild and weird you want to get with this stuff. You have full control over it all. So I'll switch this to 50 millimeter. Focus settings. So right now it'll say manual by default. If you click this, go to tracking, then click this arrow here, tracking focus settings. Open that up. Actor to track. You can go here, it'll show you all the actors in the scene. But if you're already focused on the actor that you want, hit this, little teardrop or whatever, and it'll say pick Manny. Do that, and then it will focus on your character no matter how you're moving the camera. See that? So as I got closer, everything got blurred in the background, but it kept our character in focus. Now, there's sometimes, depending on the lens or settings that you have, you can pick tracking, but focus will kind of get a little off, right? So you can still adjust it manually. To do that, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a setting called focus offset. And if you scroll up, it says draw debug focus plane. And if you select that, it'll show you your focus plane, like what is in focus based off of where this purple backdrop is. And so if we go back over to the right with focus offset, and I scroll, if I scroll back, you can see it pushes it back, pushes the focus back, right? But if I pull it towards us, the Manny starts getting in focus again. But if I keep going, it'll move past it, and now everything in front of it is going to be out of focus. So this is how you still can maintain manual control, even though you're tracking the focus. And this is what I do. I always select tracking focus as my focus method, and then I manipulate it with this focus offset, because all this can be keyframed. It can be animated. So as your character's moving, if your focus isn't how you want it, you can adjust it with keyframes to make it move, and keep the focus with your character as they're moving. So you can see this is really powerful stuff. So I'm going to uncheck draw debug focus so we can get rid of that. And then I'm going to reset the focus offset values. So now we have our character, we have our camera, we are ready to start making our little short. We're going to want our character to do something, right? We don't want to just have him just, standing. So let's go ahead and add an animation. So over here in the sequencer, I'm going to click this arrow to just hide all of the cinema camera settings. We don't really need it right now. And then the SKM Manny, under animation, I'm going to hit this plus button because this character comes with its own set of animations right out the box, which is really nice. So I'm going to hit that plus button. There's a lot of stuff. This is all like test stuff, so we don't want any of this. What we want to choose, let's type in walk. So there's MF walk, which is, I think, Manny female walk, and then Manny male walk. And they can either walk forward or walk in place. So we'll do walk forward, and you see his body adjusted. Now, let me unlock my camera. Let me eject, right? So I don't affect my camera's position, but I can still zoom out in the viewport and see my character. Now we have this animation in our timeline that's this length, and I can move it around, stretch it. I can repeat it if I want. And if you're an editor, this is where things will start to look a little bit familiar in a sense. And on this side here, on the left side, the green, that is our endpoint and where our sequence or our cinematic will begin. And then all the way over here, this red bar, that's our out point. This is where our sequence will end. So anything past this red line and anything before this green line will not be in our end cinematic. So just keep that in mind. You can drag and place it wherever you want. Another way is this cursor here on our timeline. Say you want it to end right after the animation. You can quickly adjust the endpoint by going over here in the bottom left where it says set playback end to the current position. Select that, it'll automatically do that. Or you can set in points and out points with the left and right brackets on your keyboard. So I can go back over here and hit the right bracket, and it'll change my endpoint over here where my cursor was. I know I've been hovering over this, but our character now has an animation connected to it, right? So down here, if I hit play, our character's now walking. Once the animation track has ended, it just goes back into its like default pose. So let me just extend this just a little bit more. So we have that. So you can also just hit the space bar, but you got to make sure the sequencer is selected. If the sequencer is not selected and you hit space bar, it won't work. So just make sure that the sequencer is selected, hit the space bar. Now our character's walking. Now, obviously, this animation was created with video games in mind. Its motion is going to be tied to one specific spot. Now, if you're working with motion capture and things like that, things are a little bit different. If we had a walking sequence that I had recorded in motion capture, we would actually see the character walking from whatever start point to that end point, say it's like over here. But since this animation is set up to, work for video games, I could change it, but I kind of want to keep it this way because this will make us actually utilize the keyframing animation tools just so you get used to that, because there are going to be times where you want to do that. So we're going to keep it as is so it stays in its position as it's walking like this. Now, let's say we want to do a shot where the camera's tracking it walking from here over to here, right? So let's go back to the beginning of our sequence. Another shortcut, a quick way to go back to the beginning of your sequence is to hit the up arrow on your keyboard. And what we're going to want to do here under SKM Manny on the bottom left, go to transform, click that arrow so it expands, click rotation. We see here location. These are the data points of where it is in our scene. This is where it's starting, right? And we just want to make sure, because, X, Y, Z axis, I don't know why. As long as I've been doing this, I always get them confused, which direction is which. So don't feel bad if you're confused, because I still get confused. But what I like to do is I just test, right? So I'm going to grab this red arrow, move it over, and I see that affected the X axis of its location. So now I know, okay, the X axis or this red arrow, that's what I want to change over time in my sequence. So I'm going to hit this keyframe to mark the start location where it is now. And then I'm going to go to the end of my sequence and drag him, let's say like right here, and then hit the keyframe again to mark the end. And so now hitting that up arrow, take me to, well, no, first I have to have my sequencer selected, then hit that up arrow. If I want to manipulate anything in the sequencer, it has to be selected. Now I'm going to hit the space bar. And now we can see the characters walking from the beginning point to the end. And now we've just made our first animation. Look at that. That's crazy. Now, if you've never actually like done any form of animation, if you're, you've just like done film and, shot on a camera, you've never messed with what, Maya or Blender, or if you've never done like After Effects or anything like that, congratulations. This is awesome what you've just done. This is great. This is the beginning of something special. It may not seem like a lot now, but this is the foundation of being able to do some really cool stuff. All right, so now that we got that walk going, let's now manipulate our camera to track with him. So now I'm going to open up the arrow for the cinema camera and select transform, location. So now as he's walking forward, and you can see this green line that lets us know where he's starting and where he's ending. Actually, let me select my camera first and make sure this is where I want to start. Maybe I want to do this. Maybe kind of like at an angle, kind of lower like that. I don't know. And then I will go here to transform on the camera in sequencer, hit the keyframe at the start, then go to the end, seeing where the character ends. Try to match, let's see, maybe that looks good. And hit that as well. And as you noticed, instead of dragging the camera like I did with the character to set the keyframes, I just controlled it with the mouse and keyboard. And that's what makes this so powerful, right? It's like you can create these super dynamic camera movements and control it like a video game. It's really a cheat code. It really is. So if we go back, you see right here, hit play. See, now my camera is moving with my character. Now, let's say, okay, I don't want it to just track in that direction. Maybe I want it to kind of, you know, move back and then maybe like start like a little revolve thing or something. So then what we could do is, let's say it's tracking to about like here. And then we want it to start revolving around the character. I'll hit a keyframe here. And this is the new endpoint for that little movement. And then I'm actually going to delete this because I don't want it to move all the way back over there now. So if I hit play, it'll track and then stops there. Then have the animation kind of keep going. And then I'll move here. Now, since I just moved the camera in a bunch of different directions, instead of just hitting X, Y, or Z, I'm just going to go up to where it says transform and hit the keyframe there. And this is going to keyframe all of those axes. So now, as you could see, as we move, see, this is where I messed up though, actually. Because you see, I moved my camera and I only keyframed the X axis. So even though it's still moving, but it didn't snap to where I started, right? So I should have hit the transform all keyframe. So, which is no problem. What I'll do is I'll just start fresh. I'll delete these keyframes. And this is actually good this happens so you guys can see how not properly keyframing the features that you want can change everything, and then it gets frustrating if you don't catch it in time. So let's start it right here. I'll hit the keyframe on the transform all right at the top. Walk to about right here. Have the camera here at that point. Hit the keyframe on the transform all. Walking a little bit more. Have about here. I don't know how this is going to look, but just so you guys can see. Transform all. And then ends there. Let's just have it kind of be like here now. Transform all. Cool. So now you can see as we move back, we have our camera movement. And if I hit play, it's moving around. Nice. Look at that. That is absolutely amazing. All the time I put into Unreal Engine, just the fact that I'm able to do this, as simple as it is just, it still blows my mind. This is so cool. And this is all real time. Like everything can be changed. I can move him somewhere else. I can move objects around, whatever. I can have him walking up a hill and just throw all that in there real time, and it doesn't affect anything. It's so cool. So this could be our cinematic. We can be done. But, you know, if you want to add a little extra flair, you can throw another animation on top of it, right? So let's close all that out. Let's go to SK Manny. We already have our animation track. What we can do, hit the plus button again, and this is going to add a second animation track. And so we can do, let's see. Let's do run. So let's say he's starting off walking and then goes into a run. See, I have the animations playing at the same time, so it's doing like a little hybrid walk and run right now. So, but it's cool that like it knows to kind of blend, right? Because that gets to what I'm gonna show next, is that you can blend and combine animations together. So let's just move this out the way a little bit. So let's say you want him to walk right here, and then about here, it's time to just book it. So let's shorten that. And actually what I should do is I'll just drag this up onto the same track, right? So it'll automatically get rid of that second animation. So this is the intersection of the two clips. So if I start dragging my run track over my walk, you'll see it automatically creates a fade between the two. So if I hit play from here, it'll fade into that next animation. Now, we want the fade to be a little bit longer to make it a little bit more natural. So I can extend this, right? And see what that looks like. There we go. That starts to look a little bit more natural. And you just keep playing with the beginning points of the run. Make it as long as you want until it gets that like desired look that you want. But I'm not going to play around with it too much. You know, that looks fine. That looks fine to me. Now, obviously, because it's running now, we want to change our keyframing. Once he starts running, we're going to want his speed to pick up. So let me get out of my camera here so I could just move around and see what this looks like. So this is our endpoint. So, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to want our endpoint to extend. So let's go to our transform on our SKM Mani. I'll just hit transform here so it knows to reach that point. But then when it's time to run, what we're now going to do is this endpoint, we're going to extend like, I don't know, let's see what that looks like. And then hit transform keyframe. Now it's a lot farther. So let's see what that looks like. Hit play from here. Okay, not bad, not bad. So it picked up some speed. So I can click on that keyframe and drag it closer if I want. Let's see. That picks up the speed. So now he's running faster to get, because now he needs to get to that endpoint sooner versus if I kept the keyframe here. So this is also how you can kind of manipulate the timing of things, right? Because between this point here and this last keyframe, it needs to hit it by this point. So it's able to speed that up. So that's a quick run. I like that. So it's walking. Now it's running. But now let's see the walk. You know, the walking's kind of, you know, he's not really moving while he's walking in the beginning. So we got to kind of give him a little bit more distance to cover. So I would say, let's do the move tool, move him back maybe here, hit the keyframe. That's his new point. So now, okay, nope, walking way too fast. So hit Control Z to undo. And then just move back just a tiny bit then. And then hit the transform keyframe. And then hit play. All right, now he's walking a little bit. Bam, goes into the run. Nice. Okay, now let's see if that's also gonna, you know, affect our camera movement. Walking, running. I mean, you know, not bad. He's running past the camera. That's pretty cool. Obviously, if you don't think it's cool, then you can change it. I want the camera to be more here already, let's say. So I'll hit transform. Let me open that up again. Go down transform on the camera. I can close that. Hit the keyframe there. And let's see. So now the camera knows to be on the other side a little bit quicker as he's running away. Let's see. I kind of don't even need this keyframe anymore. So let's delete that and see how that looks. And then it continues off. And at that point, the sequence is done. So with that same shortcut, if I know, okay, my sequence ends there, I hit that right bracket, set my new out point, because now I know that's where I want my sequence to end. So here, run, end. That's going to be my cinematic. This doesn't have to be yours. I just wanted to show you something very simple that utilizes these tools, right? Adding a character to your sequencer, creating the sequencer first off, adding character, adding a camera, adding camera movements, and adding character movements, right? Adding character animations, blending those animations. These are all fundamental tools that you're going to need to do bigger and better things. Oh, and also something to keep in mind too on this timeline, you want to make sure this top track right here where it says camera cuts, this reflects what's going to be rendered out. So if, say, this is our endpoint where that red line is, right? If this track is like this, it will render this part. See, if I click here, I can actually lock into what the sequencer or what the rendering sequence is going to look like. So it's going to render that, and then it popped out to the viewport, but it will not, this last part will not render out. So you always want to make sure this camera cuts track is as long as your endpoint. We only did one camera in this, but if we wanted to add another camera, this is where you would do your kind of like you're editing your cuts. So if I add another camera here, put myself in this top corner. So we now have Cinema Camera Actor 2. Let me lock in. Or actually, no. First, let me move this camera somewhere else. This could be like a top angle. So if I lock into our main track, say I want this first camera stay here, and then here, as he's running, I want to cut it to this other camera. I can then right click on this track, this top track, go to edit, split section. Then on this second part that's been split, right click and choose at the bottom, change camera. And this will change to Cinema Camera 2. So if you're experimenting on your own and you're adding your own cameras, like more cameras, I mean, this is how you would then change it if you want to go off and do that. So you see here, starts here, bam, as he's running, it switches to that second camera. And the more cameras you add, the more you'll do your little editing splicing here. There are ways to export, say you have multiple cameras, you can export each camera angle separately. You can do that. But that's a whole other complicated situation. Since I'm the one editing my stuff anyway, I just end up editing everything in Unreal Engine like this when I add more cameras. And then I drop it into DaVinci Resolve, mainly for like coloring and, you know, kind of like finalizing it and how I want to export it. But yeah, I actually do all of my editing and camera cuts in Unreal Engine. How do we get this sequence out if you're happy with it? Again, adjust it. Just mess around with it, do whatever you want, make this sequence your own, right? But when we're done, what we're gonna have to do is utilize what's called the movie render queue. And this is how we're going to export our sequence. And what we're gonna have to do is we're actually gonna have to activate this. We're gonna have to turn this on. It's considered a plugin. So this will be your introduction to how to activate a plugin in Unreal Engine. And so if we go up to the top where it says edit, scroll down and hit plugins. And here are a whole bunch of extra add-ons that allow Unreal Engine to do extra cool things. As you can see, there's so many here, and depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you know, you can ignore a lot of it. Some might be important. Like I said, we're gonna turn on the movie render queue. So in the search bar, type movie render queue right here, and we're going to select it. And every time you activate a plugin, you're going to need to restart Unreal Engine. And it'll queue you. It says you must restart Unreal Engine Editor or Unreal Editor. But before we do that, let's do this, right? If you are looking to export, say, to Apple ProRes, I'm just going to let you know right now, you need to turn that on as well. I know we're on a PC, but you still might want to use ProRes. That's what I do. So if I type in ProRes, Apple ProRes Media, I'm just going to turn that on as well. And then hit restart. And then it's going to say, okay, do you want to save everything we just did? Absolutely. Save selected. And then it's going to close, and then it's going to immediately reopen on its own. And my camera's still set to super slow. So let me readjust that with the holding down the right mouse button and the mouse wheel to adjust that. And you see our character's still here, but if you noticed, our sequencer is gone. Every time you close the program, sequencer doesn't just stay up unless you like set it to always show up. And we didn't do that yet, right? So we have to open up our sequencer again. And to do that, we'll hit Control Space to open up our content browser. And we will look for our folder that we made called Sequences, our first short sequence. Now that we've activated our movie render queue, we'll go over here to the clapper, click that, and that's going to open up the movie render queue window. And then I'm going to keep this as simple as possible because this also can get a little bit confusing. But what we're going to click on is unsaved config here. And these are our export options. First, look at exports. This is the file or the format it's going to export to. Right now it's exporting to a JPEG sequence. And what this means is it will export your sequence, your cinematic, as individual JPEG stills that you would then open in a program like, say, DaVinci Resolve or some other program that can read a JPEG or a PNG sequence and put them all back together. You know, this is done to, you know, export a higher quality project, but it also can be confusing if you don't know how to do it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hit delete because we don't want it. And then we're gonna go to settings and find the export section. And you can see here, there's a whole bunch of different options. And what I do is I select Apple ProRes because that's the easiest and what I'm most familiar with, the file, and it's, decent quality. So I'm gonna hit Apple ProRes, but I'm gonna change this codec here. Apple ProRes 4444XQ is a really high quality large file. We don't need that. I mean, for this, I'm honestly gonna put Apple ProRes LT because this doesn't need to be a high quality file at all. But feel free, again, if you're familiar with JPEG sequences or any of this, feel free to go crazy. And now under rendering, the only thing that we need to make sure is checked is right here where it says render main pass. And this is pretty much saying render the thing. Okay. You can make this more detailed to set up to where it like renders multiple passes. It renders multiple layers so you can adjust other things. But again, we're not worrying about that. So you shouldn't have to touch anything here. And then the output, we'll go over here. This is how you can output your resolution. HD, this is fine. We don't need to change this at all. This is how your file is going to be formatted. There's different ways to do this. For now, just leave that as is. The output directory, this is where your sequence or your cinematic's going to be saved to. I will just choose the desktop, make it simple. Right now, what is our timeline set? I think our timeline's set to 30 frames per second here. You can also change this as well. If you want it to be 60, if you want to be 24 frames, you can do that. Or you can select use custom frame rate, change it after the fact, right? So I can change it to be 24 frames if I want, or 60. But I'll just keep it at whatever my sequencer is already set at. Okay, so this is all we need right now to render out our project. We need the output codec, Apple ProRes. And then we need to make sure that it's going to render out the main pass of our sequence. And then that output is going to be 1920 by 1080 HD. And it's going to output to this directory, which for me is my desktop. So now I will hit accept. In the future, you come up with some settings that you really like. You can actually go back under unsaved config up in the top right here. You can save this as a preset to come back to. So if you save it as a preset, you don't have to manually go in and readjust these things every single time. And now that we got that done, if you've got your project where it is, you're happy with it, then it's time to export. If you're not happy with it, keep messing around with it. It's fine. But if you are, here it is. We're about to do it. If you go down here in the window where it says render local, go ahead and hit that. And now it's rendering our scene. It's happening. It's doing it. And it's done. And that was a very simple scene. So that happened really fast. And our settings are very simple. Obviously, the more complex, the more detailed, the more high quality your scenes are, the longer that will take. I'm talking hours and hours longer. And so now, if I go here to my desktop, this right here, I'm playing it in VLC player. I'll go full screen and then I will get myself out of there. Hit play. There it is, guys. There is our sequence. We did it. You made your first cinematic in Unreal Engine. You download the program, you learned some basics, how to move around, how to manipulate objects, how to add actors, how to create a sequencer or a timeline, add characters and camera to that timeline, add animations, blend animations, keyframing your camera movements, and then exporting all of that out. So now you can share it with the world and let them know what you're about. And really feel very proud that you're taking this step because it's very scary to learn something new. And I hope that you continue to learn it because as much as a lot of us filmmakers hate to admit when something new is on the rise, like Unreal Engine 5, it is here. I feel like it is here to stay. And within the next few years, it's going to become a huge player. I mean, it's already a big player in the filming space, but it's going to be even bigger and more important for us, especially as indie filmmakers, to know. And also it gives us more power. Like we now have a way to kind of previs our own stuff where that software, there's no way we'd have access to that, right? So you can previs your own short film, still shoot it live action, but previs all, make sure everything's right because that's what the big budget films do, right? Like they already have Spider-Man shot in a simple 3D version before they go out to shoot it. You do the same thing. You go out there, be great, use the tools that will help improve your skills as a filmmaker, right? And Unreal Engine 5 will do that. Again, congrats. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you will continue to learn this awesome program. And yeah, until next time.